Hey, everybody, it's Natalie B. McKenzie with The Whole Woman, and welcome to this week's episode of Living Life Authentically with yours truly. This month, we're celebrating many things, one of which is Black Music Month. And here we are to tell you all about some great musicians, one in particular who is today's guest. But before we get to the guest, you might be wondering, what are we doing while we're doing things a little differently? Well, the TWW team is off to the screening of Surrounded. More to come on that. We'll tell you where you can see it and what it's all about. In the meantime, get ready. Our guest today is dedicated, and he's an accomplished jazz saxophonist with an academic background in music. He has spent his entire life mastering his craft, and he's had 30 years exploring these sounds with a quartet, a quintet. He's played with Buster Williams. He's played with Dave Holland. He's played with Delphio Marsalis. That you may recognize that Marsalis name. Yep. Dizzy Gillespie, Nancy Wilson the Great, one of my all-time favorites, Jimmy Heath, and so many more. He has been featured in films on television and on Broadway several times, some to include Malcolm X, Annie Bolden, HBO series Boardwalk, Empire, Broadway musicals, Five Guys Named Mo, Cat and the Kings, After Midnight, Shuffle Along, and currently Ain't Too Proud. And guess what? He tours extensively with his band, the Mark Gross Quartet. So I've given it away as to who today's guest is. He is an accomplished educator and has held positions at Princeton University, Prince Claus Conservatoire, William Patterson University, and Wells Fargo Jazz for Teens. He's currently at NJPAC as the Director of Jazz Instruction, and he is also a professor at Prince Claus Conservatoire, currently in Groningen, Holland. How does he have time for all this while he's a part-time lecturer at Rutgers University? Ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome today's guest, the indomitable and amazing Mark Gross.
Hello. Thank you. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. I'm like, who is your guest? Who is that guy?
Mark, listen, you know that expression that says familiarity breeds contempt?
Absolutely.
This is truly one of those things because I've known you and Sherelle rather. And every time I think of you, yes, I know you're an accomplished musician, but I had no clue it was this extensive.
Yeah.
What went into the making of the man I just read about? Who are you?
Yeah. Well, I mean, first of all, thank you for having me on the program today. I think this is wonderful what you're doing. And also in line of celebrating this wonderful month of Black music, I'm honored to be your guest today. What went into the makings of Mark Gross? Well, it started humble beginnings and still humble in where I am now, but humble beginnings for sure. And that my mom grew up in a little southern town called Hamlet, North Carolina, which interestingly enough, as an adult, I realized was the same hometown as John Coltrane. We'll get to that in a moment. Yeah. I mean, this is like a little country town. Like when I would visit there as a child, dirt roads, literally, you hear the expression, you got to walk a mile to get to the store. You literally had to walk a mile to get to the store. My grandmother had pigs in the backyard, chickens running through the house, all that. So anyway, my dad, being from Baltimore, when my mom became about 18 or 19 years of age, she moved from Hamlet to Baltimore. She worked in and odd jobs, cleaning houses, washing clothes, those kinds of things. My parents both were born in the late 20s, 1929. So they grew up in a very, very different time as to what's going on now in terms of young people. As a father, I'm sure you can relate. My children would have no idea of that time frame. So she did whatever she had to do to make a living. My father was in the military. So as what was told to me by him, who was a great storyteller, he met my mom when she was working at a restaurant, and he went up to her and, kind of acknowledged how he thought she was a very beautiful young lady. And he said to her, one day you're going to be my wife. And so,
oh boy, on first meeting. Oh.
Yeah, very, very, very confident man he was. So he would frequent that restaurant, and they sort of started to get to know one another. And long story short, they did. So he went to North Carolina, asked my grandmother, my mother's mother, if she could give her daughter's hand to my father in marriage. So she agreed. They got married. They settled in Baltimore. My mother always loved family, always loved children, always loved kids. But in their formative years of marriage, it was very hard for her to conceive. But my mother was always a very spiritual woman, very, very devout Christian. She would pray on it, pray on it, pray on it. And for many, many years, probably 5 or 6 or 7 years, she was not able to conceive. Well, I guess the Lord heard her prayer finally. And then on the seventh child, which was me, she was like, okay, God, I hear you enough.
So for every year she prayed, God blessed her with a child.
Right. So I have 6 siblings,
Awesome.
3 brothers and 3 sisters.
Oh, look at that. Even
Yeah,
Stephen.
yeah.
I love
So
it.
growing up in Baltimore, that's where it all
Okay.
began.
So your dad being a military man and your mom, and of course the context of time is everything, because we're talking in the 20s, not very
Yeah,
many opportunities. What we take for granted, going to just going to high school and going off to college, I know was not readily
yeah,
available to most
yeah.
African Americans.
And I'm sorry, interesting to that, my dad and my mom said at that time they were only allowed to go to school up until the ninth grade. And then they could not go to school anymore. They were done. They had to get a job.
Wow.
Crazy. Absolutely crazy.
So
Yeah.
you're the seventh child,
Seventh
and
child.
you're this master accomplished musician. What was going on at home, and where did this musical talent come from?
Sure. So fast forwarding, again, being the seventh child, my siblings being older than me were mostly either in school or they were in some kind of recreational activity. And myself and my brother, youngest in age to me, were at home most of the time. We found out, or I found out, that my dad used to play saxophone by accident. I was in his room one day, just kind of rummaging through his room, and I looked under his bed and I noticed there was this big box, this big case. So I opened it up, and sure enough, inside of it was a saxophone. So I slowly kind of started, every day I would fool with it and put it together and try to figure out how it worked, all the while thinking that no one hears me, no one sees me. Mind you, it's a saxophone, so it's making all kind of noise. One day my dad comes home, and it's almost like how my light just went out a moment. Something happened, and I turned around, and my dad was standing in the door frame kind of looking at me. And so he said, do you know what you're doing? Mind you, I was scared as all get out. I said, yes, sir. He said, all right, let me hear you. So I kind of played a couple things on it. Then he said, you know how to put it away? I said, yes, sir. So I took it apart and put it back in the case. And then he said, okay, go downstairs, help your mother get ready for dinner. So I did. But I'm thinking like, wow, that went down too easy. I didn't get reprimanded or nothing about it. So I said, oh, he's going to wait till we get to the dinner table. And again, being the youngest of 7, he's going to let all of us know, do not mess with my saxophone. So I'm sitting at the dinner table, still thinking something's going to happen. It's almost like an episode out of the Brady Bunch. You're thinking at some point my parents are going to say something about this. He says nothing. Anyway, this goes on for weeks, and I never touched it again until one day he comes home, and he said, Mark, he called me from the door, and I answered him, and he said, come downstairs. And I came down, and I'm thinking to myself, this is the day. He hands me a case, and I opened it up, and it was a brand new alto saxophone. He says, this is for you. Leave mine alone. And it really wasn't until my adult life that I realized that in that moment where he first saw me, he probably wanted to buy me a saxophone, but could not afford it at the time. So he had to save up to
Oh,
get me a saxophone. I still have it to this day. My lights. I'm sorry. My lights are going bananas over here.
The lights are having the moment I'm having. It's like,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah. Maybe that's a sign.
Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
Mark,
Yeah. Yeah.
what a
Yeah.
beautiful story. Okay,
Yeah.
so you teach yourself to play this stuff?
Initially, I did because again, I'm only 6 or 7 years of age, so I'm in what fourth grade, third grade, whatever
Mhm.
that is. I don't even know. I have to do the math on it. So yeah, I initially taught myself, but when I got to the fourth grade, so that wasn't even fourth grade. That was probably like kindergarten or something, or first grade at most. But when I got,
Did you and your dad play together after he gave?
oh yeah, my dad again, my mom and dad, because my dad was the pastor of a church.
Oh,
So being all of the siblings played. Like my oldest sister played piano, my my oldest brother played guitar, my brother under him played drums, my other two sisters were the choir, the brother up in age just above me played trumpet, and then I played saxophone. So
so you had a
music was,
full band.
yeah, we had the band, you know. We were a dear friend of ours, Miss Deidre Tate, kind of joked about we were like the Jacksons, growing up in Baltimore. We were the gospel Jacksons.
I love it. So your dad was the pastor, your mom was the first lady.
Right.
Was she musically inclined as well?
Neither of them were trained in it. They were self-taught. So she could play piano, she could play drums, she could play harmonica, she'll wear a tambourine out. You give her the right song. She
I love it.
sang. Yeah, it
This
was
is
great.
fabulous.
It was
Okay,
great.
Mark. So here you are, this 7-year-old with his own instrument. Your whole family is a band. You're practicing. I mean, who needs to go out for lessons when you can do it all at home? But what were you like outside of home with the saxophone? Was music your entire life, or did you expand and explore other hobbies and sports?
Yeah, I had a lot of wonderful explorations. Again, interesting enough, again, during that time, that was a time when our parents encouraged us to go outside and play. So for me, that led me to taking up a lot of sports. Initially, just kind of in the neighborhood, going to the local basketball court or playing catch outside with friends in baseball. And when I got older, around 10 or 11 years of age, the recreation center that was near my home had all these little league teams that I would try out for and would get on these teams and learned how to play quite well. So I played baseball, football, basketball, swimming, tennis, track and field. I won first place in a bubblegum blowing contest. I won first place in the spelling bee. I mean, you name it, I was involved in it. So sports, even now, I still love sports. I love tennis. I love swimming. Of course, I don't do it as a profession, but it got to a point for me where I had to make a choice. Is it going to be music or is it going to be sports?
I have a question for you, Mark. Do you know how to cook?
I do. I do.
I have a problem. Do you know how to sew?
Yeah, I mean,
You were
I can.
supposed to say no. You can't be
Well,
everything.
but you didn't put a qualifier on it. See, you can cook. Is it very good or is it so? I can sew, but am I going to see the thread on the outside of the pant leg, or is it going to be woven into the? It's depending on what you're looking for.
Oh my God. So you are the man, both right and left brain are firing on.
Yeah, you're pausing for a second, but um, right and left brain both firing off. But again, for me, it was one and the same. Like I never looked at things as if it were a challenge or difficult in that sense. Like you talk about cooking, I would literally sit in the kitchen with my mother um, to learn how to cook. Um, and those things, I think that's why for me in terms of music, that's why it was natural for me to take up and learn how to play the saxophone. So, you know, learning the saxophone from elementary, middle school, into high school. I'm just going to keep talking. I saw we lost Natalie, but she'll be back. Um, when I got to high school, I went to a school called the Baltimore School for the Arts, which was that was probably a real pivotal part in my life. Saying that because what was interesting too is that when I got to the school, you had to audition for the school. It was kind of like, I don't know how many are familiar with the show or the movie Fame, where you had musical theater, you had dance, you had the visual arts, you had music, you had all of these artistic disciplines going on simultaneously. That was the School for the Arts, during the 1979, 1980. So when I got to that school, I was very scared on my audition, only to find out when I walked in to audition for the school, my fourth grade band teacher was also the teacher at that school who was on the audition panel. So that really helped to kind of ease my fear of auditioning. Just talking about my high school. And so I got accepted into the school, which was probably the best thing that could happen for me. Again, growing up in Baltimore, there were, I don't know how many have seen the movie or the HBO series The Wire. I grew up in that kind of environment. So music kind of kept me out of the bad elements of the street and offered me opportunities to really excel in the arts. My teacher again would come and when she was the principal trumpet player for the Baltimore Symphony Orchestra. So she would often come pick us up, which is probably why I love Volkswagen Beetles now. She'd pick us up in her Beetle, take us to the orchestra, hear them play, and bring us back home. So I was exposed to all these things. And the school went on to have success in many students in multiple disciplines. Most notably, Tupac Shakur went to that same school. They were the incoming class when I graduated. Jada Pinkett went to that school. One of my dearest friends, great saxophonist, Antonio Hart. Um, Three of my nephews went to that school. So it was a wonderful, fantastic experience. And then after I left the high school, again, because of the opportunities that kind of were presented to me for high school, I went to college for music. I auditioned and got accepted to Berklee College of Music in Boston. Got the acceptance letter, but soon after that came the letter of tuition bill, and my parents cringed. Again, humble beginnings. But again, my high school teacher, Chris Ford, Dr. Ford, I love him dearly. He was able to talk to one of the professors at Howard University, one of the saxophone professors, and they offered me a full 4-year scholarship at Howard University. I know, Deidre Tate, you love that. HU. I went there for 1 semester. At that time, unfortunately, the music program didn't offer enough of what I needed at that time. So I would talk to my parents, during that freshman year. And what I stayed in Drew Hall. It's funny, I still remember the dorm I stayed in. They were able to figure out how to get me to Boston. So the fall of or the spring of 1985, I went up to Boston, up to Berklee College of Music. And again, coming from a place like Howard University, I'm thinking Berklee is going to be like this big full campus up in Boston. But it was kind of just almost like a city campus. There were music buildings, kind of like how schools are in New York City, like a Juilliard or a Manhattan School of Music. It's not on a campus per se with, a yard, as we call it, a quad where people can sit on the grass and study. It's on the streets of Boston. Great college though. And I spent the next 4 years up in Boston. You're on mute.
Yep, I'm muted. I
Okay,
see.
thank you.
Technology is not working
I
with us
know, I know.
today.
I'm having my problems here too.
But that's a good thing because we're still able to stay connected. Mark, uh, how did you make the decision, or was the decision made for you organically to stick with the music and that you were going professional?
Yeah. Music is like I mentioned, it was always a part of the family, always a part of me, just inherently, because I would like again going back to when I was a kid, I would play in church all the time. My dad, of course, being the pastor of the church, we would be there on Sunday, but we would also have to be there for choir rehearsals on Friday night. We would be there on Wednesday for what we call YPWW, Young People Willing Workers. We were there on Tuesday for Bible study. We would be there Saturday for, my mother would cook for the neighborhood. So I was always around music. So even in those instances, if I wasn't at the saxophone, I would sit at the piano or I'd play at the drums. Now here I am in a school studying music, so it kind of felt like that was a part of my DNA in a way.
Mhm.
It was so many relatable things in and outside of music. Now this is getting to the other side of my comprehension and development of music, in that I started to understand the resonance of music and understand how, especially talking about a month that we're in now with Black History, or Black Music Month. I understood the shoulders of the legacy of music, particularly jazz. You mentioned some of the names that I had a chance to play with: Nancy Wilson, Dizzy Gillespie, James Moody. The list goes on and on and on. Being on the road with people such as that really kind of gave me a deeper insight of the things that I studied. I remember being on a tour once, a 2-week tour. I'm on a tour bus, and the seat directly in front of me is Dizzy Gillespie. So every night I'm talking to Dizzy Gillespie about Thelonious Monk, about Charlie Parker, about Charles Mingus. What was it like playing in the 50s, the iconic 52nd Street where they had all of the jazz clubs? What was it like even touring in the South as a Black musician during that time, during segregation? So I'm learning all these things, and dark and bright moments, or talking to Nancy Wilson about what that was like, who I adored. Nancy, we shared the same birth date, so I would often, after I got to know her, I would call her up on February 20th, wish her a happy birthday.
Wow.
So music was always a part of me, and I understood the power and the special gift that I was given in music, and how it can transform and change people's lives, depending on the artists. You know.
Mark, you have told us how immersed you were in music and developing your craft and being committed to it. What's happening in your personal life during all of this? Are you balancing out? Are you, you know?
Well, balancing is always a thing, right? I do remember my dear wife Sherelle, who we met in Boston, and we kind of met through music. I pledged Alpha Phi Alpha. She pledged Delta Sigma Theta, the sorority, the fraternity, and all of the Divine Nine. That we would have events, and sometimes we would collaborate on things, and they were always looking for people to do music. And my line brother was a good friend of my wife, and he said, "Well, my line brother goes to Berkeley. He can put a band together." So that's kind of how we met. Fast forward to that, the balance. I remember once we got married, um, and we had
Wait a
that.
minute. You get married. How long after
I know,
meeting did you
I
get
know. Well,
married?
it's many years. I'm giving the fast forward version. We courted all through college, even came to New York together. She went to law school at Hofstra University, and I was in Brook. We lived in Brooklyn, and again, that was some rough days.
Okay. The lawyer and the musician.
I was trying to find gigs, and she was in law school, and So we got married in 1991, and there's the family. Two
Fabulous.
beautiful sons. Um, but the balance is funny. The balance. I remember one day she was like, I was like, well, she wanted to go and do something. And I was like, well, let me go practice and then we can go out. She was like, you're going to practice every day? I was like, yeah, kind of. So the balance, I do find the balance, even with my two sons who you saw, having, even when they were kids, having time to make sure that I would be at their baseball games and take them to
Mhm.
soccer practice and all those great things. Cause time flies, and I wanted to be able to have memories with them, just as my dad had memories of me as a kid.
Mark, you're a two-time Grammy Award-winning saxophonist. You're phenomenal with passing the craft on by getting involved in these um, arts institutions and teaching students, and in Newark at NJ Pack. So we know you're processing the kids that some of them don't have music in high school. Did you pass the music on in the family? Do the boys play?
Oh gosh, no. They do in other ways, I say. My oldest, Mark Jr., he went to Ithaca College and he majored in film and writing and script writing and all that stuff. And so he now lives in Los Angeles, and he works for a film company in Culver City. So he kind of is in the arts. He was sort of a thespian all through high school. He loved the theater, and then that in turn led him to wanting to write, and he started writing scripts and producing his own little film shorts and things of that nature. So he understands music as it relates to the need for his filming and his script writing. My youngest is into sports. He's a freshman. He just finished his freshman year at UConn, and so he wants to go into marketing and business. They both have an appreciation for music, but they're not musicians in that sense. Yeah.
Now, um, you're currently promoting a new album. Tell us about that album and what makes this one unique or special, or what are your thoughts on this particular album?
Sure. Well, the last one I did is plus strings. I've always had a desire and want to record with strings. Thinking of so many iconic musicians: Charlie Parker, Johnny Hodges, John Coltrane, Clifford Brown, all these wonderful people, Wynton Marsalis, who have done recordings with strings, and I just love the sound of that. So I wanted to do something similar to that, but in my way, in my own voice. And so this recording kind of has music of people who I love, the Brecker brothers, Michael Brecker, and other great songs that I orchestrated a little bit differently. But the current recording that I'm working on now, which will be released later this fall, is called The Gospel According to Mark. This one is going to be a very, very interesting recording, in that it taps into not only all of my musical interests: gospel, jazz, the blues, uh, hip hop, poetry. It's going to have all of those elements
Wow.
with strings, but it's telling the story. And again, it taps into my upbringing as growing up as a PK, as a Christian kid. It's telling the story of Mark, the gospel, Mark the saint.
I was going to say,
So,
I love the play on words there.
I absolutely, absolutely. Most folks think you're talking about, no, we're not talking about that guy from New Jersey. We talk about the one
Mark of the Bible,
who
what
that's
does that?
right. So it's gonna be that one, and it's gonna, like I said, I have poetry on it. Some of my contemporaries who I worked with. I have singers, a gospel choir, strings, a rapper. One of my nephews is rapping on one of the tracks, but it's all through a jazz lens. Though it still is very heavily a jazz recording, but you'll get those kind of elements in the recording.
And what will the name of that album be, and when should we look for that?
It's The Gospel According to Mark, a
I
jazz
wanted you to
suite.
say it again.
Yeah, The Gospel According to Mark, and
So
it'll be this fall.
Oh, that's phenomenal, Mark. We're short on time. We're getting ready to close out, but real quickly, just delve into some of your TV appearances. Tell us about some of the things that you've done on TV and what was most memorable.
Yeah. I've done things such as what was mentioned, the HBO series, several things there. I've done one of Jamie Foxx's movie, Annie. I've done a lot of soap operas, but the most memorable is probably that one picture right there we're looking at, the great Forrest Whitaker, um, in Godfather of Harlem. I did a couple of scenes, and of course, he's portraying the notorious gangster Bumpy Johnson. But I met Forrest Whitaker at a jazz club in New York City, who loves jazz, by the way. And we just had a wonderful, wonderful conversation about everything but what, but him. He was more interested in what I'm doing, what I listen to, and sharing those collaborative thoughts. And then, months later, I find myself on the set with him. And ironically enough, he remembered me, which I thought was a wonderful thing. And I did a couple of episodes on that show there. So for me, that was probably one of the most memorable TV appearances, working with him.
Well, Mark, I am just so grateful that we get a chance to talk with you and that we get to celebrate Black music with you. As you are passing the legacy on and having an impact on young teens, talk to us about Jazz for Teens that you're
Yeah.
involved
Yeah. And that's one of my students there, Clay Hudson, who's going to be going to Morehouse in the
with.
fall. But we were on a show with Sandra Bookman, a show on ABC called Here and Now, where on this particular show, we were talking about the program there at NJPAC, TD Jazz for Teens, having its 25th anniversary. So the program has been in existence for 25 years. And I think one of the things that I try to impart on the students through my experiences is how it can, you don't necessarily have to become a professional musician. Um, in fact, my biggest goal with them is through the arts is try to inform them on how they can become and inspire to become just great people who want to go on and do great things. And one of the things I share with them is a quote or a video of Denzel Washington talk about his success, and that in his early development, he would audition for all these things and he wouldn't get it. He went to his 8th audition, he didn't get it. 9th audition, didn't get it. Then he said, but then I went to my 10th audition and I still didn't get it. So what I tell them is the narrative behind that, and that you have to be dedicated, you have to be disciplined, and you have to be consistent. And so those things, equipped with having great instruction, can help provide you opportunities for success. And if you don't have those ingredients in your DNA, in your fiber, and the support of not only in your family, but sometimes it may not be, but the support of someone that can help to raise you to that next tier, you can achieve success. And success is not always about monetary, you know. So
Awesome. Well, Mark, we're looking forward to hearing the gospel according to Mark. I have to say that again because I think
amen. Come on now. Let the church say amen. Look at that. He's falling from the sky right there. Look at that.
we can find you at markgrossmusic.com. I don't know why your name sticks on my tongue. I love it though. And you're on IG, you're on Facebook, you're on Twitter and LinkedIn. But Mark, how do you stay connected and grounded on a daily basis, especially with your family before you go?
Yeah, I think that's it. The key for me is family. I do all of that. I do it for wanting a legacy that my family and particularly my 2 Black boys can be proud and find some inspiration in their path and their journey, as I did when I was a young kid growing up, looking at both my parents. So that's my motivation.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mark, for sitting with us. And thank you for
Yes.
enduring the connectivity issues we've experienced today. I'm Natalie B. McKenzie. We have been talking with the indomitable two-time Grammy Award winning Mr. Mark Gross. Listen up and stay tuned for his new album coming up this fall called
The
Gospel.
Gospel According to Mark.
I love it. I'm Natalie B. McKenzie. I wish you enough life to live, enough joy to give, enough love to share. I wish you enough. Good night.